I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Everything everything I do, so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move, so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that. Spitting slow, spitting fast, I could roast, I could gas. Think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past. And the pettiness, a reflection of the emptiness. Hilarious, you think you're worth my time, you're delirious. Mysterious, because you hide behind a fake exterior. Inferior, you know I'll always be a bit superior. Get off of me, this ain't no humble brag. I want you to hear words, you can say them back. I want you to feel free from the chains at last, and to believe in what you got, it was built to last, yeah.
Now that I've been put through hell, I never got anyone's help. I had to do it all myself.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Gonna learn the consequence of being incompetent. Mental health is confidence, dreams and some honestness. I'm not here to save the day, that's for you to take away. I could play a million mind games, but instead I say something not illogical, something that is topical. Rub it on and watch it go, make yourself unstoppable. Dreams are irresponsible, but they're always possible. If you just believe, you could be so remarkable.
Thoughts in my head, a collage and they spread. I'll be great one day, going off of my meds. No, I'm not giving up, no, I'm not giving in. I will make it to the top, taking off in the wind. I gotta make it, I'm saving every day to taste it. I'm patient, but my mind, it can hardly take it. I'm chasing a dream that I've had for several ages. A vacant, modern kingdom for the taking.
Now that I've been put through hell, I never got anyone's help. I had to do it all myself.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
She spoke with such confidence that the woman could almost smell the rain in the air. The promise lingered in her mind as she made her way home, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. The woman went away feeling hopeful, her steps lighter, her spirit lifted by Deborah's faith. She shared Deborah's words with her family, and together they waited, watching the sky for any sign of change. Sure enough, a few days later, the sky darkened and the first drops of rain fell on the thirsty earth. The people rejoiced as the rain soaked into the ground, bringing life back to the fields. Children danced in the puddles, and laughter echoed through the village as the long drought finally ended. The woman's crops were saved, and her family was able to eat and thrive once more. The whole village celebrated the blessing. The fields turned green again, and the air was filled with the scent of new growth and fresh hope. This was just one example of how Deborah helped the people. Her wisdom, faith, and compassion touched many lives, and her prayers brought hope to a weary land. She was a source of strength in times of trouble, and her kindness was remembered long after the rain had fallen. Deborah was a true woman of God, a leader, a judge, and a friend to all who sought her under the palm tree. Her story reminds us that faith, courage, and kindness can change the world, one prayer at a time. Even today, her legacy lives on, inspiring us to listen, to care, and to believe that hope can grow even in the driest places, if only we have the faith to plant it. For 20 years, the Israelites had suffered under the cruel rule of King Jabin. Jabin was the king of Canaan. He had a powerful army, led by a fierce general named Sisera. Sisera had 900 chariots fitted with iron blades. The Israelites were outmatched and overwhelmed. These chariots were terrifying weapons of war. Sisera and his army terrorized the Israelites. They were forced to pay heavy taxes. They lived in fear of Sisera's chariots. The Israelites cried out to God for deliverance. They had almost lost all hope. In a time when Israel was suffering under oppression, the cries of the people rose up to heaven. Their hearts were heavy with fear and uncertainty, and they longed for deliverance. The Israelites faced daily hardship, their lives overshadowed by the cruelty of their oppressors. Yet, even in the darkest moments, hope flickered in their hearts. God, ever watchful and compassionate, heard their pleas. He chose to speak to Deborah, a woman of wisdom and faith, who served as both prophetess and judge among her people. In the quiet of her tent, Deborah listened intently as God revealed his plan. She was no ordinary leader. Her reputation for fairness and spiritual insight had spread throughout the land, and people came from far and wide to seek her counsel. God instructed Deborah to send for Barak, a respected leader from the tribe of Naphtali. She knew this was no ordinary summons. It was a call to courage, a call to action. Deborah's message was urgent, and she wasted no time in delivering God's command. She understood the risks, but her faith in God's word gave her the strength to act decisively. Barak was known throughout Israel as a brave and capable warrior. He had proven himself in battle, earning the trust and admiration of his people. His leadership inspired confidence, and his presence on the battlefield was a source of hope for many. Yet even the strongest leaders can feel the weight of responsibility when faced with overwhelming odds. The enemy they faced was formidable, and the stakes had never been higher. God had chosen Barak for a special purpose, to lead the Israelites into battle against their oppressors and secure freedom for the nation. The task was daunting, but the promise of victory came directly from God. This was not just a military campaign, it was a test of faith, a moment that would define the future of Israel. Deborah sent for Barak, and with unwavering conviction shared God's message. She explained the divine plan in detail, assuring him that God would be with them every step of the way. Her words carried the weight of divine authority, and her calm assurance brought a sense of peace to the troubled leader. God promised to deliver Sisera, the commander of the enemy army, and all his men into Barak's hands. But despite this assurance, Barak's heart was troubled. The enemy's forces were vast and well-equipped, and fear crept into his mind. He could not ignore the reality of the challenge before him, nor the lives that depended on his leadership. Barak hesitated. He did not want to face Sisera's powerful army alone. The thought of leading his people into such a dangerous battle weighed heavily on him. He wrestled with doubt, questioning whether he was truly up to the task that God had set before him. With humility and honesty, Barak turned to Deborah and said, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I will not go." Was it fear? Was it reverence? Perhaps a bit of both. He needed her faith and presence to give him courage. In that moment, Barak revealed his vulnerability, showing that even the bravest warriors sometimes need the support of others to find their strength. Deborah understood the depth of Barak's fear, but she also knew the strength of God's promise. Her faith was unshakable, and she was certain that God would be with them, guiding their every step. She did not judge Barak for his hesitation. Instead, she offered him the reassurance and partnership he needed. Without hesitation, Deborah agreed to go with Barak. Together, they would face the challenge ahead, trusting in God's power and guidance. Their unity became a beacon of hope for the people, a sign that faith and courage could overcome even the greatest obstacles. However, Deborah gave Barak a solemn warning. She told him, "The honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." Deborah did not shame Barak, she stepped up. In this moment, Deborah's courage and faith shone brightly, setting the stage for a story of unexpected heroes and divine deliverance. The journey ahead would test them both, but their willingness to trust in God and in each other would change the course of history for Israel. Deborah and Barak gathered 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun. They assembled on Mount Tabor. Sisera heard that the Israelites were preparing for battle. He gathered his army and rode his chariots to the Kishon River. The stage was set for a mighty battle. On one side was the powerful army of Sisera, with its terrifying chariots. On the other side were the Israelites, outnumbered but filled with the courage that comes from God. Deborah saw that the time was right. She said to Barak, "Go, this is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" So Barak and his men charged down Mount Tabor and attacked Sisera's army. The Lord threw Sisera and all his chariots and army into confusion before Barak. Sisera panicked and jumped down from his chariot. He fled on foot. The Israelites pursued Sisera's army, defeating them completely. Not a single one of Sisera's soldiers was left alive. After the chaos of battle, Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, found himself utterly defeated. His chariot abandoned, his armor caked with dust and sweat, he ran for his life across the harsh, sun-baked wilderness. Each step was heavy with fear, his mind racing with thoughts of capture and death. The once mighty general was now a desperate fugitive, his only hope to find shelter and safety before his pursuers caught up to him. The landscape around him was unforgiving. Jagged rocks, thorny shrubs, and the relentless sun beating down on his back. Every sound behind him made his heart race, as he imagined the thunder of Israelite hooves drawing closer. He was alone, stripped of his power, and the weight of his defeat pressed down on him with every labored breath. In his frantic search for refuge, Sisera stumbled upon the encampment of Jael, a woman known for her wisdom and strength. Jael was the wife of Heber the Kenite, a tribe that lived on the fringes of the great kingdoms, respected for their independence and resourcefulness. The Kenites were neither fully aligned with Canaan nor with Israel, but they were known for their ability to survive and thrive in the margins, forging their own path in a world dominated by powerful kings and armies. Jael herself was a figure of quiet authority, her reputation for hospitality matched only by her keen sense of justice. The Kenites were a nomadic people, skilled in survival and at home in the unforgiving desert. They had managed to live in peace with King Jabin of Canaan, maintaining a delicate balance between the powerful nations around them. Their tents dotted the landscape, a symbol of their adaptability and resilience. Life in the desert was never easy, but the Kenites had learned to read the land, to find water where others saw only dust, and to build strong family bonds that helped them endure hardship. Their way of life was simple but dignified, rooted in tradition and mutual respect. As Jael stood at the entrance of her tent, she saw Sisera approaching, his face drawn with exhaustion and terror. She recognized him immediately, not just as a stranger, but as the enemy of her people, the man who had brought suffering to Israel. The stories of his cruelty had traveled far, whispered around campfires and spoken of in hushed tones among the women and children. Now fate had brought him to her doorstep, vulnerable and alone. Jael's heart pounded as she weighed her options. She knew the stories of Sisera's cruelty and the pain he had inflicted. Yet, she remained calm and resolute, her mind already forming a plan as he drew closer. She understood the gravity of the moment. This was not just a chance encounter, but a turning point in the struggle between her people and their oppressors. Jael's courage was not born of recklessness, but of a deep sense of responsibility to her family and her faith. With a steady voice, Jael invited Sisera into her tent, offering him the hospitality that was sacred among nomads. She welcomed him inside, assuring him that he would be safe under her roof. In the ancient world, the laws of hospitality were powerful and binding. No guest could be harmed while under a host's protection. Jael's words were gentle, her demeanor kind, masking the storm of thoughts swirling within her. Inside, Jael gave Sisera milk to drink, soothing his parched throat and weary body. She covered him with a blanket, creating a sense of comfort and security. Exhausted beyond measure, Sisera let his guard down, believing he had finally found sanctuary. He soon drifted into a deep, untroubled sleep, unaware of the danger that awaited him. The tent was quiet, the only sounds the gentle rustle of fabric and the slow, steady breathing of the sleeping fugitive. Jael watched him closely, her expression unreadable, as she waited for the right moment to act. As Sisera slept, Jael moved quietly and purposefully. She reached for a sturdy wooden tent peg and a heavy hammer, tools she knew well from years of setting up her family's home in the desert. Her hands were steady, her resolve unshaken. The weight of what she was about to do pressed upon her, but she did not falter. She knew that this act would change the course of history for her people. With careful steps, Jael crept up to the sleeping Sisera. The tent was silent except for his slow, steady breathing. Every movement was deliberate, her resolve unwavering as she prepared to act. In that tense silence, time seemed to slow, and Jael's thoughts turned to the suffering of her people, the hope for deliverance, and the courage it would take to see this through. She knew there would be consequences, but she also knew that sometimes extraordinary times called for extraordinary actions. Summoning all her strength and courage, Jael drove the tent peg through Sisera's temple and into the ground. In a single decisive moment, she ended the life of Israel's greatest oppressor. Sisera died instantly, and Jael's bravery would be remembered for generations as a turning point in the struggle for her people's freedom. Her act was not only one of personal valor, but a symbol of hope and deliverance for all who had suffered under Sisera's rule. The story of Jael's victory would echo through the ages, inspiring countless others to stand up for justice, even in the face of overwhelming odds. When Barak arrived at Jael's tent, she showed him the body of Sisera. Barak knew that God had given them a great victory. Deborah and Barak sang a song of praise to God. They celebrated the victory and thanked God for his deliverance. Deborah's song is recorded in the Bible. It is a song of victory, faith, and hope. It celebrates the courage of those who fight for what is right. It reminds us that God is always with us, even in the darkest of times. Deborah's story is an inspiration to us all. She was a woman of God who listened to his voice and followed his guidance. She was a courageous leader who trusted in God's power to deliver his people. Her faith and her courage led to the freedom of the Israelites. Deborah's story teaches us that God can use anyone, regardless of their gender or background, to accomplish his purposes. It reminds us that with faith in God, all things are possible. Her song of victory continues to resonate through the ages, reminding us that God is always on the side of those who trust in him. Thank you for watching The Bible Storyteller. If this story inspired you, share it with a woman who needs to hear it today. And remember, God is still writing powerful stories through willing hearts. Like, share, and comment.